Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
Plein Air Magazine, for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
In 1904, following the discovery of gold in southwest Nevada, a boomtown arose from the desert dust, and the city of Rhyolite, population 16,000, became the third largest city in Nevada. It boasted 3 railroads, 9 banks, 45 saloons, 30 hotels, and 5 schools. Following the Great San Francisco earthquake, investors were forced to pull their money out of the mining industry. By 1916, the town was gone.
Hello and welcome to The Grand View. I'm Stefan Baumann, and today we're in Death Valley National Park. This place offers such a paradox of scenery, from high mountain peaks to a lake bed that is 280 feet below sea level. So come on with me and explore this wonderful place they call Death Valley National Park.
Death Valley it's one of the things that makes it really significant is the geology. You're dealing with the lowest spot in the country. You're dealing with one of the greatest elevational changes. You've got over 11,000 feet between Badwater and Telescope Peak here in Death Valley. But it's probably maybe most famous for having the lowest elevation in all of North America. But you've got this great basin here in between the mountain ranges. You've got all the faulting where the mountains have been uplifted, pulled apart, the valleys drop down, and Death Valley is probably the greatest example of that basin and range faulting. Zabriskie Point is where folks walk up for a view into the Furnace Creek Badlands. And they're looking at Manly Beacon, which is a prominent outcrop of the Furnace Creek Badlands. The Furnace Creek Badlands are an ancient lake bed predating Death Valley. I mean, Death Valley itself has only formed in the last 3 to 5 million years. This lake bed was there before Death Valley, maybe 7 million years ago. So you had erosion from smaller surrounding mountains and mud and stuff deposited in that lake bed, eventually covered up, turned to stone, uplifted. And so we're looking at those uplifted mudstone and old lake bed deposits. Well, Golden Canyon, of course, is the bottom end of the Furnace Creek Badlands. So if I'm at Zabriskie Point, I'm over on the east side of the Badlands, and if I'm on the west side, I'm at Golden Canyon. And if you were here visiting Death Valley 30 years ago, you would have driven a road into Golden Canyon and went back into the back and look at the beautiful red slopes of the Red Cathedral and the rock colored up by the iron oxides. Well, we had a tremendous flood in 1976, totally wiped that road away. And now Golden Canyon is just a beautiful walking path. We've never put the road back. It's much too narrow for two-way traffic nowadays with modern vehicles. So it's a wonderful walking trail. And as you go through those ancient lake beds, you can even see ripple marks on the edges where the water would have flowed on the edge of that lake 7 million years ago, and that's preserved in the mudstone walls there in Golden Canyon. For me, it's the grand views, the vistas. I think that's one thing that's so striking for most people, is it seems like you can see forever. You can see for over 100 miles, the great clear skies out here. That's something I think people don't expect.
Tibisha. That means there's a mountain over here. It's a red ochre, and that's got healing powers for the tribe, and it's also paint. You paint your face or whatever, you know, and they would paint themselves up. The tribe would. This was really a green place at the time that I was growing up. Flowers galore. We used to even play hide and go seek among the flowers. Those desert gold flowers. Yeah, we've played all over through here. And then we met prospectors that was coming into the valley with their little burros. So and the little old man would say, "Come on over, kids. Come and eat." You have a big can of those big 3-pound coffee cans. He called it a hobo soup. It was potatoes, onions, and bacon in there. We met Shorty Harris. He was a miner, you know, a prospector. That's what he was. But we didn't know too much about him. You know, when we were kids, we didn't know much about him. All we knew, he was a little old miner going through, looking for gold. And he cooked for us. You know, while we're out playing around, you know, we'd meet these little prospectors. First, we used to be scared of them, but then later on, we got to be friendly with them, you know. To us, this is very important. This is our land, and we love it. They tried to push us out of here. They even tried to tear down our homes, the adobe homes. That's why we quit going up to Wild Rose. They watered them down. They watered the adobes down. This is our home. I'm born and raised here. I'm not ever going to leave. We just call it the village, and we just love it the way it is.
We're here at Artist Palette. It gets its name because of all the minerals in this area create such a beautiful array of colors. It's ironic that I'm standing in a place like this. It reminds me of the palette that I use.
Rhyolite became the third largest town in Nevada eventually. It had 3-story concrete buildings. It supported 3 railroads, 5 schools, 9 banks, over 45 saloons, 30 hotels, 2 churches, and a red light district, newspaper, power plant, telephone, and telegraph office. And with a peak population of about 16,000 people. And so it was a major town at one time. Mining really boomed during this period. But about 1906, of course, we had the big San Francisco earthquake. A lot of the financing for the mines in this area came out of San Francisco, so they had quite a problem with, by 1907, there was a big financial panic. And so if the mines weren't really producing, they started to fall off. Miners would come into Rhyolite looking for claims and couldn't find them. They spread out all over the Death Valley region. They mined all kinds of things out of Death Valley. By 1911, 1912, Rhyolite slowly disappeared, as many of the other small towns did. Many of these towns never became more than clapboard buildings when these towns would spring up. And some of them were never more than tent cities. Schwab, for instance, which was named after Charles Schwab, never became more than a tent city, and the whole town lasted about a year. Wood was scarce out here, so if a town would become a ghost town, all of a sudden people would come in and literally pick the buildings up and move them, take them apart in pieces and move them, or just scavenge the wood and take them to other places. This is actually what happened to Rhyolite.
Well, we've finally chosen a place to paint. This particular area struck me the moment I saw it. It's filled with beautiful Naples yellows, alizarin crimsons. This area is called 20 Muletian Canyon, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take burnt sienna and cobalt blue and squeeze it out on my palette. What I'm going to first do is cut my canvas into 3 sections. And what I want is the main composition to be in the center part of my painting. I see a little pathway. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm now getting a little bit more of a dynamic sketch in, a little bit more positive with harder lines. As I get into the corner of my painting, I want to apply a little bit more cobalt blue in the corners. I want to darken the corners of my painting, and then more white as I get further down. Now notice I'm just scrubbing the color in. What we want to do right now is we want to capture all the little footnotes of where the highlight is at this very moment. Throughout the painting, the light is going to be changing, and it would be almost impossible for us to make all those changes as the afternoon wears on. What I want to do is I want to put some footnotes right where the light is at this very moment. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to notice where these highlights are in my composition. And I'm just going to place them in a scribble very quickly, okay? These long lines of light. I'm bouncing around and I'm just giving myself an idea of where the light is. What I want to do right now is actually start on the main peak. Right at this very moment, the main peak has this beautiful cast of cerulean blue, cobalt blue, a little bit of alizarin crimson, kind of a purplish tone. And I want to try to get that in my painting. And I'm going to do that by taking cobalt blue and white and alizarin crimson. I'm going to very carefully at this point start laying in the shadow side of my mountain. At this point, we are not going to waste one brush stroke. Every brush stroke counts. We're past the sketching phase and we're now in the painting phase. So what we're doing is we're taking a mixture of blue and yellow and a lot of white and creating a greenish tone. All of these different tones make up Death Valley. yellows and purples and greens and oranges. Now we're going to start laying in the shadows on the left-hand side of this peak. And we work out, and I'm working from the center outwards. It's easier to gauge my painting by... Now nobody is going to hold up a map to make sure that every one of these ridges is absolutely perfect. You can kind of let the brush just skip and miss. This ridge actually appears taller than the ridge in the center of my painting. Although the ridge obviously in the back of my painting is the tallest, because this ridge is closer, it appears taller. And this is the shadow color of these mountains. These mountains are lighter than the mountains in the background, which is a little different than we do in most of our paintings. Most of our paintings, our foregrounds become darker. But in this instance, the actual material, the actual rock, is lighter. So these colors will be lighter, but we'll make them warmer by introducing more yellow ochre and Naples yellow right out of the tube, so the color will be more intense. Now what I want to do is sketch in the little roadway, and I'm going to do that by adding a little bit more white and yellow to my brush. I want to make sure that this roadway is placed in fairly early into my composition, and I'll slowly work all the ridges of mountains around that. So now we have all of these ridges in a shadow color. These colors are cooler, they have more blue in them. Now we're going to start creating the ridges by adding light. And what I'm going to do is mix white with yellow and a little bit of burnt sienna. Now I'm going to take this bright color of yellow and burnt sienna and cad yellow and lots of white, and I'm going to start highlighting my ridges. Now the effect that I want is a very strong highlight in the middle of our painting. Now notice how bright this color is. This is what's going to create drama in your painting. That central focal point being lit up like that. You want to get in all of this beautiful light. Outdoor painting is really simple once you know all these little secrets. Okay, now we've finished the right-hand side of the road. Now we're going to jump over to the left-hand side of the road. We're going to use exactly the same color. This is my mixture of burnt sienna and cobalt blue with a little bit of white. And we'll start painting the ridges. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start placing the little edge along the left-hand side of our road. And since I have this color, I really want to create a dynamic effect between the light and the shadow, the two different ridges. I'm just going to smear a little of that color alongside my mountain here, just to darken that ridge a little bit more. Light and shadow is the most dramatic effect that you can achieve in a painting. And the more you can do that, the better. Now this is not an effect that I'm witnessing at this very moment because it's becoming very flat because of the afternoon light. I'm recreating what I remember from this morning when the lighting was so dramatic. I just love seeing all the little detail, all the little nuances. You get very intimate with your subject matter. It's magnificent. You truly understand what makes these places so special and why these national parks have been set aside for future generations. I love painting outdoors. I've spent my life devoted to it, and I never knew what pleasure it would bring me. Well, it's time to take our focus away from all these mountains and take a look at this beautiful sky. When I started, the sky was very flat, But if you notice right now, the sky is absolutely beautiful. There's some beautiful clouds coming up over these mountains, and I've just got to take this opportunity to start painting them. You can see my brush stroke. It's just a little wiggle and pull, a little wiggle and pull. Very simple. You don't want any hard edges. We're just going to highlight the clouds. Now I want you to pay attention. I'm taking this color and I'm mixing it into my background tone. This wet on wet process. This is what makes clouds look natural. You don't want to have little tiny cotton balls floating all over your canvas. You want to blend them in. Now we're going to start on one of my favorite things to do. This is so much fun. We're going to take turpentine and we're going to mix burnt sienna and cobalt blue together. I love doing this. And lots of turpentine. The paint is very, very wet. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually start painting all these little tiny rocks, but just with a flick of the stroke. Just fling the paint just like that. And you just want to pull the paint just like this. Now I'm taking my sky color, what I have left over, and I'm adding a little bit of yellow and red to it. And we start flicking the highlight rocks in on top of this. Our experience here is coming to a close here at Death Valley, and we just have a few more little details to do on this painting. We've got a few little boulders to put in, a few little bushes. I'm using white, cad yellow, and a little bit of alizarin crimson, and we're going to start painting the boulders in the foreground. Now with this color, we're going to place little tiny dots of highlight. In the front, we want nice bold strokes for nice large rocks. As we get further away, we get little tiny brush strokes, little tiny rocks. Now I'm going to take burnt sienna and cobalt blue. These are the same colors that I used in the background mountains. And I'm going to place little shadows. Every one of these little tiny highlights has to have a shadow. And it's important to make every one of these shapes a little bit different. At this point, I'm going to switch to a larger brush, and we're going to start painting in the bushes. We're going to take cobalt blue and a little bit of yellow ochre. And this is a very dry brush compared to what we were using before. Cobalt blue and yellow ochre. And if you notice, I'm hitting my brush into my palette. I'm actually trying to break the hairs up so that I can create bushes with this brush. Now we're going to take this color, and we're going to keep in mind that the bushes in the distance are smaller. This is just like the rocks. As things get further away from you, they get smaller. Now, as the bushes come closer, they need to get larger. Now we're going to put a little bit of highlight on them. What I've done is I've mixed a little bit more white in this color, and we're just going to put a little bit of light on the top of these bushes. A little bit of light, a little bit of light. Just on the top of these bushes. We can also pick up a palette knife. If you look at the bush on the right, we can scrape in a few little twigs. Expanded instructional DVDs that feature an hour-long demonstration of today's painting and other paintings in the series are available at the Grandview by calling 1-800-511-1337. Join us on our website, thegrandview.org, and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting, along with a free diagram of today's subject. Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
Plein magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com